Hello everyone. Today we're going to uncover the horrifying blueprints of a bomb designed not just to win a war, but to end the world. Imagine a single nuclear explosion so large it could burn forests 400 kilometers away, shatter the sky, and plunge Earth into an apocalyptic winter. This isn't science fiction. This was Project Sundial, a top-secret U.S. endeavor in the 1950s to build a bomb so powerful it would render all future wars meaningless by threatening the annihilation of every living human being. What kind of mind could imagine this, and why? The Cold War was an age of dizzying contrasts. If you were 40 years old in 1945, you'd been born into a world of monarchs, horses, and kerosene. Planes had just been invented. Yet by the time you turned 40, the world had seen two global wars: television, jet engines, and nuclear annihilation. Change happened faster than belief. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki didn't just destroy cities, they rewrote reality. For the first time, humans could end themselves. Did we handle that realization wisely? Within a few short years, the logic of global power was flipped. No longer did armies or navies determine supremacy. Nuclear weapons did. In 1946, the U.S. offered the Baruch Plan, a moment of hope where it promised to share its nuclear secrets and disarm. But fear overruled trust. By 1949, the Soviet Union had detonated its first atomic bomb, catching everyone off guard. Suddenly, the U.S. was no longer the sole wielder of apocalypse. How do you respond to such a shock? By building something even worse? This is where fear calcifies into madness. By 1950, the world had over 300 nuclear bombs. 10 years later, 20,000. Each superpower raced to outdo the other in destructive capability. They weren't just building bombs, they were showing off horror. Test after test became a sick contest. The idea wasn't merely about security, it was about spectacle. If they can destroy a city, we'll build something that can erase a continent. When does deterrence turn into obsession? And then, the world met Edward Teller. A Hungarian physicist of stunning intellect and chilling focus, Teller wasn't satisfied with fission bombs. To him, the atom bomb was merely a stepping stone. His eyes were set on something even more grotesque: the hydrogen bomb, a weapon so powerful it required an atom bomb just to set it off. It's a two-stage monstrosity. First, fission unleashes an inferno of X-rays, which then compress a second fusion core until it briefly simulates the interior of a star. The result? A nuclear detonation thousands of times stronger than anything before. How far would you go to feel safe? When the first hydrogen bomb test in 1952 vaporized a Pacific island, the world flinched. When a second bomb, tested 2 years later, was 1,000 times more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima, humanity felt the ground shift. Teller wasn't horrified. He was triumphant. He'd turned theory into apocalypse. And still, he wasn't done. His dream? A bomb with no upper limit. A world ender. Who decides what's enough when the tools of death become infinite? And so, quietly, under layers of secrecy, Project Sundial began. Its purpose: to build a bomb so absurdly destructive that no nation would dare risk war. A deterrent not just by fear, but by existential finality. You don't move it, you don't aim it. It just sits there, silent, in a field, waiting. What kind of weapon is so powerful you don't even need to use it? We know little about Sundial. It's still mostly classified, but what leaks have emerged are chilling. At minimum, it would have had the energy equivalent of 10 billion tons of TNT. That's not a bomb, it's a miniature apocalypse. It would weigh 2,000 tons, the size of a freight train. And if detonated, the Earth itself would react. Not just cities, not just countries, but the very crust of the planet. Why was this allowed to go so far? To grasp Sundial's terror, Let's visualize it. Experts speculate that its fireball would be 50 kilometers wide, wider than most cities. It would burn everything visible before the blast wave even arrived. Deserts would turn to glass. The explosion would rip the atmosphere, creating quakes felt continents away. Fallout and soot would blot out the sun. Temperatures would drop by 10 degrees. Crops would fail. Oceans would darken. Billions would die. So, is that security? What kind of logic designs a weapon that kills everyone, including your allies and yourself? This wasn't just an experiment in physics. It was a mirror held up to human psychology in the atomic age. When fear dominates reason, the line between deterrence and self-destruction dissolves. How do we tell the difference between genius and madness when they wear the same lab coat? As the radioactive dust of early hydrogen bombs settled across oceans and atolls, it wasn't just soil and sky that absorbed the fallout. It was minds. Fear settled into the bones of world leaders, and in that terror, men like Edward Teller found opportunity. To him, the growing Soviet threat didn't call for diplomacy or caution. It demanded escalation. He proposed something radical, unblinking in its logic. If nuclear weapons caused fear, then more powerful weapons would cause surrender. What if fear could be weaponized into something so final, no one would ever dare challenge it? Teller's obsession with power didn't arise in a vacuum. He was shaped by war, by exile, and by the trauma of Europe's collapse. His belief that only overwhelming strength could ensure survival was not unique, but he pushed it further than most could imagine. While his colleagues recoiled from the scale of destruction his designs made possible, Teller leaned in. He saw thermonuclear weapons not as moral hazards, but as tools of balance. If both sides could destroy everything, perhaps no one would dare to start anything. But where does that logic end? It ended, at least for Teller, with Project Sundial. By the early 1950s, he'd already succeeded in pushing the US into the thermonuclear age. But to him, the arms race wasn't a race at all. It was a staircase, and he always saw the next step. When the Soviets tested their own hydrogen bomb, it confirmed every fear he'd raised to power. His timing, once again, was perfect. Politicians were afraid. The military was receptive. And Teller offered them what they craved: ultimate power. How do you say no to someone offering to make you invincible? That's what Sundial promised. It wasn't just a bomb, it was the end of bombs. A weapon so vast, so obviously catastrophic, that it would end the arms race by making further escalation meaningless. If detonated, it wouldn't destroy a city. It would destroy civilization. A single strike could trigger mass extinction. The fallout would not stop at borders. There would be no hiding, no shelter. And yet this wasn't fantasy. Tests were planned, resources allocated. What do we call a weapon too large to use? Here's the insane part. The device wasn't even meant to be launched. It wasn't designed for planes or missiles. It was a backyard bomb. Why move it when using it meant ending everything? Maybe it would be stored in the heartland, or placed on a remote island. Maybe it never left the drawing board. But the thinking behind it, that you could build a weapon so terrifying it would guarantee peace, is what's most revealing. Are we safer when we hold the keys to our own destruction? The idea was simple. You threaten the world with one button. If enemies advance, if borders are crossed, if allies are attacked, you press it. Mutually assured destruction wasn't just about parity, it was about willingness. Would you end it all? That's what Sundial asked. And if you say no, the threat loses meaning. If you say yes, you're admitting to a policy of global suicide. How did we come to believe these were our only options? The concept of the Matryoshka bomb, layered explosions like nested Russian dolls, was likely behind Sundial's design. Each layer amplifying the next, a cascade of annihilation. But the technical details are less chilling than the psychological ones. Teller's proposal wasn't just technical brilliance. It was existential confrontation. And it horrified even hardened generals. Some called it a crime against humanity. Others couldn't believe it had even been suggested. But is that reaction enough to stop the next one? Because while Sundial was never completed, the logic behind it won. The world didn't build a single doomsday bomb. We built thousands of smaller ones. By the 1980s, over 70,000 nuclear weapons existed. They were stashed in silos, hidden in submarines, loaded into bombers. Each one capable of erasing cities, poisoning rivers, altering skies. The difference between Sundial and our actual arsenal is merely form, not function. Isn't it more dangerous to have many keys to destruction than just one? Here's the twist. A single doomsday bomb might actually be more stable. No one dares touch it. But 70,000 weapons, that creates a dangerous illusion of flexibility. Leaders may think they can use just one, a small strike to send a message. But who knows what that message triggers? What retaliation it sparks? What automated systems or hair-trigger alerts are set in motion? In the chaos of war, reason often comes last. Are we safer with weapons we can actually imagine using? And now, history threatens to repeat. The US is investing over $1 trillion to modernize its nuclear arsenal. China is building its own stockpile, set to rival global superpowers by 2030. Hypersonic missiles, AI-driven targeting, and portable nukes make today's nuclear landscape feel more unpredictable than ever. Have we really learned anything from the shadow of Sundial? Or are we still walking the same razor's edge? The scariest part is how reasonable it all can sound. Build more to ensure peace. Prepare for the worst to avoid it. But each of these justifications leads us closer to a reality where destruction isn't just possible, it's probable. Sundial didn't happen, but the mindset that birthed it never left. How do we break that logic before it breaks us? Sundial was never built. The world never saw its fireball tear through the horizon, its radioactive breath darken the skies, or its shockwave ripple across oceans. But the fact that it was even imagined, funded, studied, and partially constructed, reveals a truth more disturbing than its existence. Humanity has flirted with self-destruction not once, but continuously. Sundial was shelved, buried under secrecy and unease, but in a twisted way, it lived on, in spirit, in logic, and in the weapons we did build. Have we simply dispersed the apocalypse into smaller, more manageable pieces? At its peak, the Cold War arsenal counted more than 70,000 nuclear weapons, enough to destroy Earth many times over. Not one colossal doomsday device, but a doomsday machine, distributed, persistent, normalized. Stored in silos, hidden in submarines, orbiting in the minds of politicians and generals. Humanity may not have pushed the red button once, but it wired thousands of them into its operating system. And worse, we called this peace. Is peace just the silence between threats? Unlike Sundial, these weapons seem almost practical. Small enough to use, just powerful enough to send a message. Tactical nukes, low-yield warheads, mobile launchers. More flexible, more survivable, and more temptingly usable. That's the real horror. Sundial's magnitude made it unthinkable. Our actual arsenal? Sometimes dangerously thinkable. Have we made it easier to end the world by convincing ourselves we won't? This illusion of control is seductive. We imagine precision, containment, escalation ladders. But real war is chaos. Machines fail. Orders miscommunicate. Fear overrides doctrine. A local skirmish, a misinterpreted signal, a false radar reading, any of these could light the fuse. Once detonated, the chain reaction may be impossible to halt. What's more frightening, the bomb we never used, or the thousands we might. And the clock is ticking once more. The arms race, once thought buried with the Berlin Wall, is creeping back. Nations are modernizing their arsenals. The US plans to spend over $1 trillion on nuclear programs in the coming decades. China's arsenal is growing. Russia's doctrine flirts with early nuclear use. New technologies like AI-guided weapons and hypersonic missiles shorten decision windows, making miscalculation more likely. Are we watching a ghost rise again? The truth is, the world has not outgrown the logic that created Sundial. The psychology is still alive. Fear breeding armament, armament demanding justification, justification leading to more fear. It's a feedback loop so deep it begins to feel like instinct. But instincts are supposed to protect us. What if this one is broken? We like to believe we're rational creatures, that science is a tool of enlightenment. But Project Sundial shows us science can be wielded as nightmare fuel, that curiosity without conscience can produce horror. Edward Teller was not a villain. He was a man of vision, theory, and brilliance. But brilliance, untempered by humility or ethics, can become monstrous. When do we say no to what we can build? Ironically, Teller's ultimate weapon may have had the opposite effect. By imagining the worst, by taking the logic of deterrence to its extreme, he exposed its absurdity. Why threaten a destruction so absolute that no outcome, victory or defeat, matters anymore? It's like threatening to burn down your own home to keep out a burglar. But are we still doing just that, on a global scale? There's a deep philosophical sadness at the core of Sundial, the idea that peace can only be kept by threatening total death. That mutual annihilation is more stable than mutual trust. Maybe, for a time, it was. But we've lived with this shadow for nearly a century now. Maybe it's time to imagine something else. Could we build systems of cooperation with the same urgency and genius that we built systems of annihilation? Because science isn't evil, it's neutral. What we choose to do with it, that's on us. Sundial reminds us not of what we did, but of what we almost did. And that should terrify us even more. We didn't build a bomb to end the world, but we built the machine that could. And now the question remains, are we wise enough to dismantle it? Let's take a breath and step back from the precipice. Sundial, in all its grim ambition, never came to pass. But the story it tells, the logic that led to it, has not vanished. Fear, pride, and raw capability once nearly convinced humanity to build a weapon that could erase everything. That possibility alone reveals so much about our species, our brilliance, our blindness, and our astonishing capacity to walk toward the edge with open eyes. We are not doomed by our past, but we are defined by it. The lesson of Sundial is not just about physics. It's about restraint, about knowing when to stop, about learning to be more than clever. It's about recognizing that some power is too great to hold. And yet, we still hold it. Not in a backyard bomb, but in arsenals spread across the globe. The ghost of Sundial whispers in every missile silo, every launch protocol, every silent assumption that deterrence will always work. But systems fail, people err, and fear still breathes under the surface. We may never forget how close we came to building the end. But maybe, just maybe, we can remember it well enough not to build it again.